Well, it's like that sometimes.
I'll just show you right now.
Thank you for asking.
Do we need to check that? We're on this slide. Let's see. These are
Casey?
That failed.
Okay.
We need to redo it. So. We're recording though.
Looks like it's working now, Casey.
Almost.
All right, well, welcome everyone to our policy and strategy meeting for today. I'd like to ask Rob if you could do a karakia tēnā.
Rebecca, nau mai haere mai ki tēnei hui o te kaunihera arohe a Taratahi, tēnei te karakia tīmatanga e whakapaingia te mahi o tātou rānei. Mai te pai maunga raro ki te tai, mai te awatonga raro ki te awaraki. Tēnei te hāpuri hawhi ai e Taratahi, whano haramai te toka. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Amen.
Thanks, Rob. We'll move to our apologies. Do we have any apologies? I have one from Stephen. Any others? No. I haven't heard from Russell at all. So I'd like, is there a mover for our apologies?
I'll leave those.
Robin and seconded. Jill, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest to declare? Thank you. We've got nobody for public forum, so we'll move straight to the confirmation of the minutes on page 1. Does anyone have any alterations or corrections to make? Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Would someone like to move that these are an accurate record of our previous meeting? Seconded by Robin. Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move to item 6 on the agenda, the Wairarapa Combined District Plan Change. We have Debbie here as well from Perception Planning who helped put this report together, along with Solitaire, so welcome to you. Would you like to speak to that, Solitaire?
I will initially talk to the report, just with a little bit of background. A lot of the background is fully contained in this report that I've used quite a bit of the issues and options report that Debbie herself has done. This has been a bit of an ongoing project over the last year with some discussions happening. Mayor Lang, myself, met with the other chief executives and mayors and the International Dark Sky Association when they came over here, just to establish what the process was and what the expectation was from the International Dark Sky body in terms of getting accreditation and what needed to change in the plan. When the Wairarapa Combined Plan was originally developed in 2011, Rob Hall from Stonehenge, Aotearoa, put in a number of submissions and got some of the lighting rules changed now, with some policies about reflecting the night sky and the protection of the night sky. However, the rules that are in the plan as they stand right now are not strong enough to be able to support a larger Wairarapa dark sky reserve that will get the international accreditation status. That's why South Wairarapa and we've all engaged Perception Planning to undertake their initial options report as to what is the best way forward to go down this Wairarapa dark sky reserve. And I think we did touch in the report that if it does go to the full extent to the Wairarapa in due course, it will be the largest international dark sky in the world, so that could be a pretty big coup for Wairarapa. So I'm happy to answer some process questions, and Debbie's here to also, if there's anything that I can't answer in terms of the next step forward.
So just a quick question from me. Last session is not included in the recommendation, and it's sort of with the council, but I think it just says Carterton South Wairarapa. So how, so it's only Carterton South Wairarapa that these rules would be
At the stage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is when you say it goes larger, then that would include the licensing as well.
Yeah, so what we would do as part of the plan change process, having a look at whether or not it's appropriate to include masters in at this stage at the moment. The thing with it is that the Martinborough Dark Sky Society is applying for, at the moment, South Wairarapa from Carterton, because that's there's a whole lot of steps that they need to go through basically to cover that off. And the intention is that it will expand to Marsden and possibly even Tararua at later dates, which would, if we were to limit the provisions in the plan to South Wairarapa and Carterton, that would require a plan change to extend those provisions to apply within the area. But bearing in mind that there is also the district plan full review coming up in the next 3 years, so then that's also a process that could be incorporated into as well. So we'll be doing that as part of our plan change assessment to look at the provisions, see whether or not it's appropriate to apply them.
Yeah, one was around time frame, noting that the plan is being reviewed soon. When we agree to proceed, are we agreeing to proceed prior to the review of the combined district plan, i.e. a separate set of consultations and a separate set of information to the community, or are we looking to, is the time frame such that this is going to, we're just doing the groundwork so that this will be included in the sort of consultation around the review?
No, this will be a separate process, and there is a timing matter here. The report does note that it was meant to be, would be ideal by September, but that time frame is not going to be realistic. And it's about the lighting rules and the changes that the International Dark Sky Society require us to have. And if we can get it in earlier, the rules can be the 2005.
Yeah, so the intention of doing it earlier is because the Dark Sky Society would obviously like to obtain accreditation as soon as they possibly can, and to do that they need to have provisions in the plan to be able to move forward. So what it is it's a really discrete plan change. It will be focused solely on basically lighting provisions to protect the night sky, looking at probably a couple of tweaks to policy just to reinforce that, a few minor changes to the rules and a bit of background in there. So it is really discrete. So that's great because it's a more limited nature in terms of that, what you're likely to receive in consultation and things as well. So yeah, but it is, yes, you're right, it is a process by itself, and it will occur before the district plan. Yeah.
Will it require a full consultation, or is it like a consultation minus, you know, we're just thinking costs, etc. You know, are we committing to, you know, a full public consultation?
Yes, so it does need full public consultation because it's a council initiated plan change, and there's kind of two stages to that. There's the first stage, which is in the preparation of the plan change, so that requires us to consult with, as a minimum, local iwi, the Ministry for the Environment and Department of Conservation, because they have land within the reserve, and what they do is provide us feedback, and then we look at how our provisions can respond to any feedback that's issued there. It's also our intention as part of that pre-consultation process to engage with some local businesses and some groups that the Dark Sky Society is kind of highlighting who may be interested in the provisions, to get an idea about whether or not they'd have any concerns about what we're proposing, and then the next step would be your full public notification, which is required, and the process that goes from there.
Made one other point. Coming from an aviation background, the opening image on the report looks really cool, but for me, seeing somebody pointing a laser pointer into the sky is a really, even if it is a low-powered one, I think the image without the laser pointer would be just as dramatic. I would encourage reconsideration of that.
No problem, we can do that. Noted. Thanks, Rob.
I just have a question on timeframe. So obviously September was what we were aiming for, but that's not realistic. What would be realistic to be able to?
Yeah, well, we are well on the way to basically having some kind of draft provisions on board. Effectively, we need to do this pre-consultation. We're just getting, I've kind of drafted up some work at the moment that will be getting the council offices and things to review. And then it's probably, we need to probably allow a month for those, for that initial consultation prior to notification, and then it will be coming back to you as the council with the full package, which is a full detailed what we call Section 32 report, which explains why we're doing it, and then all the provisions for you to review and then approve for notification. So we're probably looking at that time frame, maybe a couple of months, and then we can proceed to the notification.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've got one. Thanks, Rebecca. Maybe around the financial impact, etc. If we with option 3, there's obviously consultation costs, etc. Solly, would you have any idea on what the process and costs and consultation costs are going to be, and also as a lot of commercial enterprises, businesses are probably going to be the main benefactors of declaring this dark sky reserve. Is there any way that we can recoup some of the money from the stakeholders that are?
I don't think we'll be going for recouping money from stakeholders in there, particularly in this current environment. The budget to do this has always been sitting there. Plan changes are something that councils do expect during the life of a plan. We've already done South Structure Plan and Wainala as individual plan changes as well as a minor dwelling one. So in terms of the initial costs and consultation costs, that's probably mainly officers' time and perception planning's time, and that cost is going to be split between the two councils. I can't give you an exact figure on that, but in terms of the economic benefits to the region and the businesses, that will all come in with the Section 32 report, because that is a cost benefit analysis report as well. So when we get to that point, you'll be able to see there will be that economic impact. And the Martinborough Dark Sky Society have also engaged a company with money they received from the Provincial Growth Fund to do a cost benefit analysis report, which
Yeah, so they've completed that. Obviously, though, the problem with that is it was prepared pre-COVID. So it's well, it's not a problem. It's just obviously the the nature of the world has changed a little, and that report looked at the benefits of international tourism straight away, effectively. Actually, funnily enough, I'm meeting with Anna Nielsen from Destination Wairarapa this afternoon, just to talk to her about, how basically COVID's kind of potentially likely to impact and things, and that will be some of that information will be taken into account as part of being, provided within that Section 32 report that we talk about. But I mean, there is some really likely to be some amazing financial tourism benefits to the district, but there's also social health and ecological benefits of basically reducing light pollution and protecting that ability to view the night sky and the benefits that that has in terms of sleep and health and ecology, and just basically big data. So, yeah. Steve, did you have any questions?
Thanks, Rebecca. I do. I'm just wondering if you have any idea how far along the Martinborough Dark Sky Society is compared to Aoraki Mackenzie District. So when they first started out, it was around 1981, and it took till 2012 for them to get their dark sky recognition. So I'm just interested as to, obviously they've done a lot of legwork in getting to the point they are now, just how far along Martinborough Dark Sky might be in regards to them.
Yeah, I can answer that. So I met with the Dark Sky Society last week, and they are well into the process. And that's why we've got these timeframes, that they're hoping to make their application. It was September, but I think things have changed a little bit now, and they're just working out. But what is great now is that previously the International Dark Sky Association used to meet yearly or half yearly to do these applications. They're now meeting bi-monthly. So there's a lot more opportunity for the Dark Sky Society to get in front of them and put their application forward on a more regular basis. So that's great. So that, but their intention is that they're well into it, and they've got a few things to tick off in the next couple of months, but it is their intention to have that application in well within this year.
Can I just add to that, the meeting that I attended with Solitaire, there were representatives of that society, International Dark Sky Society there, and they were working hand in hand with them, and yeah, it was just a process, and it was, yeah, it's going to accumulate with this basically, isn't it?
I've got a couple of questions. It's kind of similar to Rob's questions before, just around the process and why do we need to do a separate plan change when we've got the whole review coming up? Like, is there quite a big timing difference there? Okay. Yeah, I think I'm not 100% sure, so we will probably, but we're looking at about 3 years for the full plan review, and that's probably, given that it's a full plan review, sometimes those processes can take longer than anticipated. So this is really because of that time frame. The other thing that's great about this though, and the way it fits in, is that there's an opportunity to kind of put it in to tick off the dark sky accreditation and things, but also it's an opportunity to see, well, how those provisions work and how they're working, if they're working really well. And then that also means that if Masterton and say Tararua come on board, then you know, it's already very clear how those work and for the plan review. And there are some other councils, St Mackenzie for example, who are kind of looking, are really interested in what we're doing because they are looking at reviewing their plan in relation to their dark sky provisions as well. So yeah, there's a bit of interest in it, but it's their time. So could possibly Masterton join in then when the whole one of the district plan is reviewed? Yep. Okay. Then my other question is, I've got a couple of them. So with Masterton, we're proposing to change part of the district plan. Do they need to ratify that as well, seeing they're party to the district plan, or does it not involve them at all?
They're party to it because they're neighbouring councils and they have to be consulted under the Act. Okay.
But do they need to adopt the change as well?
That's a very good question.
I would assume that they would.
They'll be on the panel.
Yes, but the regulations wouldn't apply to the Masterton district. No, so it would be the thought that if it, basically you'd have the rules that would apply to effectively an overlay area, so you know, like a heritage area, or we'd have dark sky management area, which would cover effectively South Warwick and Greytown, and then the provisions would specifically say that they only apply to that particular area. Thank you. Does this have any financial impact on councils for years to come? I'm just thinking of like street lighting, things like that. Does that bind us into changing our lighting?
So street lighting's already been done, as far as I'm aware.
So it already complies?
Yeah, it already complies. So yeah, that's with NZTA as well. They've got all the councils, I believe, have agreement now with NZTA, and all the councils, I believe, changed their lighting to comply with what would be the requirements anyway. So it would just be going forward things like any other lighting that the council has on buildings and things like that would need to comply like anybody else.
And sports fields and things, they need to start replacing taking them to a more acceptable white light rather than the bright oranges that you're seeing.
Interesting. I suppose, sorry, that's one thing that's probably a good thing to raise, is that when we went and had a similar meeting with South Warwick District Council, obviously there's a few potential proposals for things like sports hubs and sports areas, and I think, you know, things are talked about. And what we're specifically looking at is how these provisions would impact on sports lighting, and any ways that we can go ahead to make provisions that with the provisions of the plan, plus cover off the dark sky work. So we've engaged a lighting expert, and he has actually worked significantly with Sports New Zealand, and has worked with them on submissions on the Auckland plan and some other plans. So he's well aware of kind of the requirements of sports lighting, and he's particularly confident that we can get some provisions in there that won't be onerous at all for new sports lighting to comply with, and could be a permitted activity, so that actually it would probably be less likely to trigger consent requirements than what it currently does.
Thank you.
The changes to sports field lighting is for new builds only, not for existing. Existing lighting doesn't have to comply straight away. It's just either when it's upgraded or new.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's part of that, I suppose, that option for viable is the education. It's okay in line with the plan change. It's also about doing a bit of education using the Dark Sky Society. They are keen as beans to kind of spread the word, and using councils just to encourage people and say, hey, look, you know, change over your lighting because this can make some really big impact.
Cool. Any other questions? Does anyone have any discussion on this?
Rebecca.
Oh, Steve, thank you.
Sorry, just thanks for asking the questions on the sports, because that was one of my questions. Just in regards to the sports hubs in, say, Clearville Complex and Gladstone Complex and so forth, do you see them having restrictions put on them for illumination at night, even though they might have to upgrade their lighting? Do you see once it gets past a certain point at night that they will not be allowed to illuminate?
We are looking at provisions at the moment, and kind of trying to tweak some and to get the right fit, but it's looking primarily at things like light colour temperature, so taking away the blue light and making it softer lights, but also one of the big things is also providing for sufficient pole height, because what actually happens is that if you've got a low pole, then the light needs to kind of project out and higher to cover the same area. But if you had a higher pole height, it actually just goes down. So you're not getting the main problem for the dark sky is sky glow, which is basically light that projects above the horizontal of the light
fishing, so anything that directs upwards. So sports lighting can be a real problem because often pole heights aren't large enough or high enough, and then it kind of goes upwards and outwards as opposed to being directed. So one of the things that we're looking to consider is whether or not we increase a permitted activity height for sports lighting poles and recreational facilities to actually provide that. So it would be, we're really trying to look at ways that we can make sports lighting effectively a permitted activity as opposed to triggering consent. So we're kind of working around those things with our lighting expert at the moment to come up with a set of provisions. And once we kind of proceed to the next step and you can review the provisions, we can walk you through in detail what that means.
Thank you. I can just see that could have quite a large financial impact on these sporting grounds, because just from past experience, I know that putting in lighting towers is extremely expensive, and the higher they get, the more expensive they get. So, yeah, that will be interesting to see what level they have to get to.
Both complexes.
Yes, yeah. So this would only be for new lighting. Yeah.
Can I have a question? I think in early discussions I'm talking about maybe a cut-off time too. So maybe 8 o'clock at night, when the lighting does have to comply. Is it for a moment it gets dark, do you think it would be?
No, we look at, if anything, it would be looking at kind of 10, 11 p.m. So quite, and most of that time, obviously, past 10 generally, sports aren't actually being played then because people want to go home to bed. So it's not looking at when it gets dark. I mean, obviously, sports lighting is required and lighting is required for safety reasons, but particularly sports lighting, so you can undertake sporting activities, particularly during winter. So yeah, it's not a case of that we're going to say that they need to be cut off at 6 p.m. at all.
Yeah, well, that would certainly help.
Yeah.
In any case, astronomical twilight's an hour and a half after sundown anyway. So there's a long period after the sun goes down where the sun's actually polluting providing light pollution that they need to wait for. So,
and I know the lights are mainly used just for practice. So 8 o'clock at night, it's all over. There might be 2 or 3 games during the season.
Yeah. Has Masterton passed this? Not Masterton, South Wairarapa passed this already? Yes. Okay. So they've agreed to. Yes, they've agreed to proceed. Yeah. Okay.
They did that just before.
Okay.
So just a quickie for businesses, factories, again, new builds rather than existing.
New builds.
Yeah.
in discussion, does this fit neatly within our shared services policy, or do we need to be looking at that as well?
We technically don't have a shared services policy on this. Are you talking about the district?
Well, the sharing of costs between South Wairarapa and Carterton for this.
For district and related work, so we'll just fill into the subsection.
Perfect.
So, any other comments? Oh, we'll move to the recommendations then, and we'll take all 4 recommendations as one. So I will spread them out. 1, we received the report. 2, notes the intention to achieve dark sky reserve status in Wairarapa. 3, agrees to proceed with the council initiated plan change to the outdoor lighting rules of the Wairarapa Combined District Plan to support the proposed Wairarapa Dark Sky Reserve following the process set out in this report. And 4, notes that this is a joint process with South Wairarapa District Council. Do I have a move of that? Robin, seconder? Rob? Thanks. Is everyone in favour?
Aye.
Oh, carried. Thank you, Debbie and Solitaire.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Right, we'll move to item 7, resource consent update. That's you again.
That's me again.
Solitaire. Do you have any comments you'd like to make on your report?
The only comment I'd like to make is this one has been within that last period, so you're not getting bombarded with 16, 17 pages. The election to read. I did promise I'd keep it smaller, and we have. As always, just happy to answer any points of clarification.
Any questions for Solitaire?
Got one, but I just need to find it first. Sorry, yeah. Consent, so item 9. I'm just interested to know if you could just describe what the conditions are around the access to State Highway 2 and whether or not the little sort of recreational area that's sat there will be preserved, or whether do we know what's going to happen to that bit?
It's going to be commercial.
Yeah.
That's part of the subdivision.
So they've got commercial frontage?
Zone. It will have commercial frontage. The right-of-way service in the properties will go down the side of it, but that little recreation area will go, because that's all part of this title. And when it gets down to that point, I'll encourage the developer to put some columns around that, because there is a perception in the community too that that area is owned by council, because there's public seating there and there's artwork, but it is part of that private property.
So we're going to see a new shop frontage in that space?
That's the plan.
Cool. Okay, that answers my questions.
Any other questions for Solitaire? All right, we'll move to the recommendations. We only have one recommendation. The Policy and Strategy Committee receives the report. Can we move to that? Rob, and seconded by Greg. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you, Solitaire.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Right, item 8 on the agenda, Policy Review Work Plan. So this item, we've all been involved in the process to date. We had a workshop on the 18th of March, and this is a result of that workshop, just over here, providing an overview of policies that we want to look at over the next 3 years. So I don't know if you want to add anything.
The only thing I'll add is that while I was preparing this report, I discovered 2 other policies that we hadn't previously found in our hunt for policies. So those 2 have been put as a low priority for review. They're the last 2 policies on the in the work plan. Both of them were adopted late in 2018, and that was the reason why I put them as a lower priority. And I discovered them when I was looking through the policies for deletion and thinking about why those policies weren't required anymore. So the consultation policy, which we're recommending for deletion, the content of that policy is quite old, and largely that content is duplicated and covered in the community. And I think that's everything I have to add, and just happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Just remind me of the remission of water meter charges policy. Just remind me what is that?
So that's the first leaks, what we call the first leaks policy.
Okay,
so that is a policy, but it was really a small council resolution, so it was only really a paragraph. And yeah, the discussion was just around maybe expanding that policy and just rethinking the policy content as well.
Any comments? Well, I'm really glad that we've got a good framework to work through for the next 3 years. I know it's very nerdy, but I like things to be well thought out. It's good for the community as well, so they know what's coming up if they want to comment on things. So there's just one addition to the recommendations that hasn't been added, and that's just to agrees to delete the policies listed for deletion in subsection 4. So I'll read those out. They're gone. So the policies are the community recognition policy, the consultation policy, housing for elderly policy, and building control infringements and fees policy, and all those the reasons for deletions are listed here. So do I have a move? Oh, actually, I'll read out the recommendations. So 1, we received the report. 2, notes the policies which will be reviewed by the Wairarapa Library Service Committee. those that will be reviewed separately as part of the long-term plan process, and those that do not require review during the triennium. 3, adopts the draft work plan for policy review for the triennium. And recommendation 4 is agrees to delete the policies listed for deletion in subsection 4. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Jill, all those in favour?
Aye.
And that's passed. Thanks for working this evening.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our meeting. So I'll close the meeting with a karakia whakamutunga. Kia tau ki a tātou katoa, te atawhai o tō tātou ariki a ihu karati, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tanitanga ki te wairua tapu, aki. Āmene.
Kia ora.
Close. Thanks everyone.